Alrighty, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming here. Before I get started introducing the artists, I'm going to say a land acknowledgement because even though we are over Zoom right now, we are all still here in Newfoundland, and we'd like to respectfully acknowledge that the land that we are occupying is the unceded and ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and that the island of Newfoundland is the homelands of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk. So we also want to recognize that the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatukavut and the Innu of Nitassinan as the original people of Labrador. So this acknowledgement is something that we like to do at all of our events. And it's an acknowledgement that shows our commitment, and it's a commitment in practice and in action, and something that we always strive to do to show respectful relationships with the people across the province and across Turtle Island, which we call Canada. So I'm going to do a little bio reading for everybody here. First, I'd like to introduce Karen Ann Pink, who's a multidisciplinary artist and a parent of two. She works primarily with watercolor and textile / fiber art, recently working to combine traditional art, audio recordings, and programming to create digital interactive installations. As of September 2020, Karen will continue her studies in the BFA program in visual arts at Memorial University, Grenfell Campus. She currently lives in the scenic Codroy Valley with her partner and their youngest child. I'll also add that Karen and I went to school for a year when you did your first year at Grenfell, so very fond memories of that. Shawn O'Hagan was born in Toronto and moved to Newfoundland in 1975. She lives and works on the west coast of the island, dividing her time between her house in Corner Brook and her cabin in the Bay of Islands. She has a BFA from the University of Guelph, a B.Ed in art from the University of Toronto, and an MFA from the University of Waterloo. She has worked with many processes and materials for the past 15 years and has concentrated mostly on textiles. She has exhibited her work in solo and group shows, mostly in the Maritimes, and her work can be found in many collections, including the Canada Council Art Bank. That's really cool, I didn't know that. And then I'd also like to say a special thank you to Bruno Vinhas for being here as our moderator for this community conversation. So Bruno graduated from the College of the North Atlantic Textiles, Craft and Apparel Design Program in 2016 and was the recipient of the Colleges and Institutions of Canada 2016 Art Showcase Award, the Craft Council of Newfoundland Labrador Award in 2016, the Anna Templeton Award in 2016, and the Newfoundland and Labrador's Centenary of Responsible Government Scholarship in 2017 and graduated with honors. So, you know, flying colors all around. Bruno has also been a part of several different projects, including but not limited to visual arts, theater, dance. He started working as the gallery assistant director for the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador in August 2017. And then you've been working as the gallery director since August of 2018. It's been 2 years already. Since then, he has been pursuing curatorial studies and projects and has been providing information sessions in all parts of Newfoundland and Labrador in order to elevate the profile of fine, contemporary, and craft-based art within the Craft Council gallery environment. So, 3 incredible artists are here with us tonight. And I'm so happy people could come and join us and listen to them chat. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Bruno.
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you so much for having me here today. It is an honor to speak to both of those artists. And I'm deeply happy to be the bridge between Karen and Shawn, which I think they've been doing a great work through the letters in the FARR programming. And thank you, Eastern Edge, for putting this programming together. One thing that I need to say is I'm not Canadian, I'm Brazilian. I chose Canada to live, and I'm really happy to be part of the community here. So to start the whole schmazzy here tonight, there is a chat box in the bottom there. If anyone wants to ask a question, you can just pop your message there and I'll call you out to make the question to the artists. I myself have a few questions for the artists, and I'm sure this conversation is going to be very interesting. I don't know if Shawn or Karen would like to say something before we start.
No, let's just begin.
Let's just begin. Karen?
I just want to say we're happy to have you here, Bruno.
Okay, so like my very first question, and was something that reading your letters and searching your process and poking through your Instagram accounts and seeing the takeover that you did on the Eastern Edge Instagram is, why did you apply to be part of this residency? Shawn?
I applied because I was feeling very isolated. It was the beginning of COVID and everybody was stuck in their homes. I was missing my friends. I was missing my art community. I had a number of things that were planned for 2020. 2020 was going to be such an exciting year, both with the work I was doing, exhibitions I would be part of, and travel I was expecting to do. And when that all stopped, there was a time where I really was having trouble getting momentum. And then this program appeared, and I thought, why not? I'm not, I spent a lot of time on social media. I love Instagram. I post there almost every day. I'm not comfortable doing what I'm doing at the moment, but I thought I can do this. I can do this. I can have an online presence and do it. And I was absolutely thrilled that I was chosen, because it's been, it's led me in a few new directions. So it was great.
What about you, Karen?
Like Shawn said, I was hoping to connect with a wider art community. And if I'm being totally honest, I really just wanted to write and submit a proposal, because it seems like I kind of chicken out sometimes. For every 5 proposals I plan and write, 1 might get sent in. So I was determined to get this one in. And yeah, it's worked out pretty well so far.
So I saw that like in the process of creation that you both got, that you both have, like besides the mediums that you choose, you both have a passion for texture, which is something that comes out in Karen's photography work that is then translated to your final work, and Shawn with like the juxtaposition of textiles and different materials. Where does that passion come from, and like how is this process now for you, by sharing the ideas, have changed your views on that? Karen?
I've always been drawn to different textures. I've always had kind of sensory issues around textures too. There are certain materials and fabrics that when I touch them, it makes me feel like really sick to my stomach. Like my hands hurt, like I get tension in my jaw. And there's others that are very much a comfort for me. And that tends to come out in my work. It usually comes out in my paintings fairly subtly, but when I'm doing my research, I like to record the textures in a photograph, like really close up, sort of in your face, to really capture what it looks like, what it feels like, as if when I look back at the photograph later, I can still feel it and smell it in my mind. So that helps me to get it down on paper.
Shawn?
It's funny because I've always thought of color as being the most important aspect of art that I'm drawn to or that I work with. But recently, the last few years, I've been looking back at my, being an artist, and all of my very early memories are textural. And I talked a bit about them in that video that I did the other day. But I remember a very early memory of my mother cutting out a square, like a square within a square of cardboard. And it was shirt cardboard. In those days, in the 50s, working men always had their shirts taken to the dry cleaners, and they came back and there was a sheet of cardboard in there, and it was just the right weight for a child to be able to cut out, like make cutout dolls or whatever. But this time she just did kind of a frame, and I think I was about 3 years old, and I remember going around the house and just laying that on surfaces and looking at the textures kind of popping out at me. And I remember like early memories of just the feel of clothing or bedspreads, or it's, certainly my dog. It has always been texture. And I became a painter. I think that I never tried to simulate texture in my paintings. My paintings were always very flat, but what was textural was the patterning that I did in them. And then about 15 years ago, became more and more involved with textiles. And definitely it's the texture that appeals to me, and the juxtaposition of one texture with another, and my actual stitching, so that some of the texture is quite flat, but then I will do all these little French knots that are elevated. So yeah, it's something that has always been there, and I haven't always known that it's been that important, but it is.
So in the end of the day, like, I think memory is one thing that both of you evoke in the work you're doing, in the body of work that you're constructing through this residency now. And Karen, you mentioned that like you can remember the texture and you can feel them even just looking at the photography, and Shawn through like the tactile movement of like placing the fabrics and the stitching. How important is that ephemeral feeling of memory for you in this work? I will start with Shawn now.
Yeah, well, the pieces, the work that I'm doing now is all about memory, and I didn't realize that when I started these pieces. These are small textile pieces. None of them are more than like 10 by 10 inches. Most of them are quite a bit smaller, and I did not start out looking for memories. The memories just started coming up in the work and in the choices of fabrics that I put together. They're all collages, and as I start building them, more and more memories come up, and they're not the memories that you always have. They are new memories, and I just find that incredibly exciting, that I'm being able to tap into things that I have never thought of before. But it would be, oh my God, I remember, and yeah, and I guess the associations, the historical associations I have with certain materials are so evocative.
Karen?
A lot of my earlier work deals with memory in terms of grief and bereavement. And for this particular project that I'm working on, it has to do with memory, but more looking forward, not so much in sadness, but trying to capture the textures and patterns of the places that I call home, and newer, like older and newer places that I call home, which also includes my husband's home in the south coast of Labrador and Capstan Island. This past summer, we did a lot of photography and audio recordings of rocks and bodies of water and siding, peeling paint in Burgeo and Capson Island, here in the Codroy Valley in South Branch. And it just means a lot that it's a grounding. Capturing those textures is grounding. This is home. This is comfort. This is where we feel like ourselves. It's where we feel welcomed.
So I guess that like we go back to like it for me it's fascinating like how similar both of your works are. And although you're like distance wise like apart and like age wise apart and like you grew up in different societies and then you're all drawn back to this idea of like home and memory and place. And I remember that we were having a chat and you mentioned, I think Shawn, you mentioned that like isolation was something that really changed the way you see your materials and the way you deal with like the sense of place. And Karen, I think you also mentioned that like what you be saying, like what do you call home, like change with the isolation and how you perceive your work. So how did isolation change your work? Like from like the beginning, from your application process back in April, May for this residency and for what you are actually working on right now. Karen?
At first with the isolation, I couldn't make anything. I couldn't bring myself to make anything. I sat down quite a number of times at my desk and tried to sketch or paint, and it just wasn't going anywhere. It didn't feel right. So I took a break from it. And then when this call came up for the FARR program, it sounded great. You know, it's a remote residency. I could do it from the comfort of my own home. And I could still feel connected. I could still reach out, talk to other artists, get involved. So that was great. And it was when I realized that I could be connected with this program that over the summer I started to branch out. And even though I wasn't feeling like painting or stitching, I got into photography. I still want to, I told myself I want to capture these textures somehow. So I'm not painting, so let's take photos of it. Let's get a microphone and record the wind and the water. And that's where it kind of rolled into taking these textures and working towards creating a collage, but not just a collage. It's going to be online and interactive, so you can take your tablet or your mouse and click and drag.
And for you, Shawn?
I think we all, like everybody had difficulty at the beginning, and artists, it's very difficult being able to speak about the moment or speak about your world at a time where everything is just so frightening and so unfamiliar, and for us to expect of ourselves to be able to just, well, I'll make work about that. And it was really, really difficult. I felt, because I've got such a long project that I'm working on, and I get such comfort out of these little pieces I'm doing, I thought I could just continue doing that. And I couldn't, because I had to pay attention to what was happening and how I was feeling in the moment in those first few months that the lockdown began. I also was suffering from a shoulder injury and couldn't get any medical treatment for it. And I knew that if I kept stitching the way I had been, that I would eventually do a lot of damage and probably end up having to have surgery on it. And so I decided to switch to painting, which is something that I've done most of my life, and use some of the designs that I had come up with on these little pieces and use that as a basis for some of my, for the paintings. And as I worked on the paintings, I realized that I was pouring into them everything I was feeling in the moment. So the small textile pieces are all about memory and the subconscious, and my paintings became about the pandemic. And I think I did about maybe 30 of those paintings. And then I got to see a doctor, and then I got to start stitching again, and also started coming out of myself, as I think we all did in Newfoundland, just because things didn't get as bad as we thought they were going to. And we started opening up again. And so I was able to go back to what I had been doing. So I don't know, because we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with the work, but I really think the textile pieces were about the past, and the paintings were about the present moment.
What about the future? That's a question for you, Shawn.
Okay. Yeah, I just, like, you kind of thought you knew where you were going and you don't. And I'm very comfortable right at the moment continuing to do this work. I have no plans for it. It's just my studio is getting, more and more of them. And I have no plans for them right now, because who knows? I don't know to be reaching out at this point for exhibitions, or like, you just don't know what to do. So I'm kind of just making. And I was saying the other day when we were talking just about how September, like this residency has been the month of September, and it's just been this beautiful transition. I wrote in my last letter to Karen just how we started out in summer and now it's autumn. And it made me it made me go very slowly through this month. Often September is just so packed with activity that you don't notice that incredible transition from one season to another. So I don't think I want to really be planning the future at this moment. I just want to just keep making what I'm doing right now.
And what is the future reserved for you, Karen?
Well, right now I'm looking forward in many ways. I'm back to school. Some of my courses are actually helping me with my texture research, because our first few projects are all about texture and exploring texture and translating them. So that's exactly what I've been doing all summer. So that's great. And I'm just slowly plodding along and working on this project, this digital project. I'm going to start cutting out some shapes on my computer from the photos and drawings and paintings. And I think the future is hopeful.
One thing that I want to go back a little bit, and it's something that you both mentioned and I mentioned as well, is about those letters, which is a very interesting way to do a residency. Like, you guys, as I said, are in opposite spaces, but you kept communicating in this symbiotic relationship of mentorship and mentee between both of you. Where did the letters came from?
Shawn can take this one. I love it. I love what she came up with.
Yeah, so it was that we were both, we contacted one another when we realized that we had been paired together, and I had proposed that I would do blog entries, and years ago I had a blog. I kept it for 4 years. I wrote every day a little something with a photo, mostly that was the photos. And I thought, well, I could go back to doing a blog for this residency. And then I heard that Karen was going to do journal entries. And I really wanted to get to know Karen. And I thought, well, maybe we could just write letters to one another online. And I loved that we both, like, as soon as I mentioned it, we knew exactly what we were talking about. I said, oh, it would be kind of like sisters or really close friends writing to each other in the 19th century and waiting for the letter to arrive. And then Karen wrote back and said, that is so Bronte. And I remember saying to you, like, are we the same person? It was just that. And I feel like if we did not sign the letters, I think it would be hard to tell who was writing, because I think we've got the same, like, I find it really, yeah, we express ourselves, we talk about, I think we say things simply that carry a lot of weight. I think we both do that. And I just, I really look forward to my letter. Yeah, every few days. It's great. Has been a lovely project. And I think what is so interesting, if people don't know us, is that we are so many years apart in age and in experience, and yet we are talking the same language. And I think that that's just fascinating. And we both live on the West Coast.
I have one last question, and I'll open up for everyone to ask their own question. Is one thing that I'm very interested in, I know we've been talking about process and mediums and textures and materials. Like, how do you make that selection for yourself? Should I throw the ball to Karen first this time? It's with you, Karen.
Question. I gotta think about that one. Can you say the question again?
How do you think about your materials and your process, and how do you choose them?
Oh gosh. I usually just go for a walk out in the woods or on the beach, or go for a drive and just look. I look and listen, and usually something catches my eye that really draws me to it, like a rock, but it's a specific rock. It's got some different pattern, or it's a different color, or it's really rough or really smooth, whatever it is that day that's really drawing me to it. Or leaves, the patterns of leaves. And I just love that. I just love going out and exploring. And sometimes it's just around my house, things I've forgotten about, or I walk past every day, and then this day it just jumps out at me. Oh, that's so pretty, or oh, I love that color or that pattern. So I'll take a photo, and maybe I'll sketch it. Maybe I won't. Sometimes I put it in a file for later. I like saving the photos for later, because when I go through my file on my computer, then it makes me stop and think, well, where did I take this photo? And what was I kind of thinking or feeling when I took that photo? And maybe I've got a different perspective of the texture when I look back at it later than I do the day I take it.
And for you, Shawn?
Well, the work that I'm doing now, the little textile pieces, I've done close to 300 of them. I'm actually looking at the one I'm working on right now. What I love about what I'm doing is just how important each material that I choose is to me. And I feel that a lot of, like, I use only vintage or secondhand or gifted materials. I don't go and buy new materials at all. And so as I'm working, I don't know if does that show up at all?
Yeah.
Okay, so the piece underneath is a hand embroidered piece that somebody did. I don't know who, and it was on a handkerchief that a friend gave to me that had belonged to someone that she knew. This piece here I got on Etsy, and it's part of a flour sack. At one point during the Depression, flour was delivered in just bin bags, and in the States, they realized that a lot of people were making clothing out of the fabric, and so the flour companies started to make patterns on them. And so I often have my eye out for those, because I think that's such a wonderful story. This piece I got when I was in Port Union. I was invited to go to the Women's Institute and just go through their materials. And I came away with bags of fabric. And I love that each piece that I'm working with holds a history, and I make my basic choices, but then I work very for a long time and very ritualistically do the stitching on it, so that the stitching can take, I got a piece that size, it could take up to 8 hours of just stitching. And I really feel that I'm paying attention to the materials that I'm using. And I like that as a maker who is also an environmentalist, I don't want to add to what there is already. I don't want to take new things. I want to use old things, and I feel that I'm keeping a lot of these scraps out of the landfill by using old materials.
Well, I think I ran out of questions right now. I'm sure that I have a bunch more to ask, but all these lovely people here watching this conversation, I'm sure they're dying to ask you guys questions. So someone wants to pitch in and ask a question? Just go ahead, Daniel.
Marilee, did you have a question as well?
I do. I have a whole bunch of them.
Go ahead. You do your first question first.
Okay.
I'll just ask one of both women, and also Bruno. I don't know where Karen's from. Bruno's from Brazil, and I know Shawn was born in Ontario and grew up there. Karen, are you from Newfoundland, and whereabouts where you spend your childhood?
I'm originally from Burgeo, Newfoundland. That's on the southwest coast. Beautiful white sandy beaches.
Absolutely. One of my dearest friends was from Burgeo. She passed away at 96.
Marilee, I met you at a baby shower a couple of years ago.
Did you? Who's baby?
Mandy Keeping.
Oh, right.
Remember?
Thank you. So my question is, for all of you, is today, what is your sense of home? And, like you talked about memory and home influencing your work. And so I wanted to know, in relation to where you're living now, what is your sense of, the core of home?
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Yeah.
Okay.
Marilee, that's tough. I feel that the memories that I'm having are about family and about being a child. And I grew up in a suburb of Toronto in the 1950s. And I did not attach myself to that place. Like, there were moments, but it was not about place. My sense of place didn't develop until I moved to Newfoundland at the age of 25. And that's just something that has slowly grown more and more and more. And I remember when I went back to do my master's degree in the mid 90s, I was going to be away from Newfoundland for 2 years. And I almost died from grief at being away from the ocean. And I can remember taking rocks that had seaweed hanging from them. And in my studio for 2 years, I had these kind of pinned up on a wall in my little tiny studio, just as a reminder. And I think I had to go away to realize how deeply every breath I take is about the place that I'm in now.
Thanks, Shawn. That's lovely. I'm going to interject. When I went to Halifax to go to law school, I had exactly that feeling. I had grown up in New Brunswick, and being in Nova Scotia, I found out what homesickness is. I had never felt that before, and it was profound. Okay, Bruno?
Oh, me. Okay. It's tough. Like, I carry a lot of things from the home where I was born in. Like, I was born in the northeast part of the country, the first capital of the country. My culture is heavily influenced by the African culture of all the slave trade that happened, which is absurd what they did, but I was happy to grow up around them. Like I grew up within the African culture in my city. And like my dad has African roots and most of my friends are Black. And that changed me as a person completely. And when I moved away, um, I've been saying that I've been moving, I've been coming smaller and smaller and smaller in order to become bigger myself. I left a city that had almost 5 billion people living in it to a place in Europe that had millions of people living in it. And then I moved to the other side of the world in New Zealand that had like a couple 100,000 people living in it. And I moved to Newfoundland that has a couple hundred living in it. And that sense of getting smaller in places and somehow always being drawn for water. Like I lived and worked in islands pretty much my whole life, even though in Brazil there's not many of them. When I got here, I found myself being happy for do what I want, what I always wanted to do. Like I have this crazy passion about fabrics and thread that is hard to explain. Like if you want to see me happy, throw me in a bunch of threads in my face and I'll be like, yes, I'm happy. And I think the thread of life in Newfoundland is the most amazing thing. And that what makes me feel home. Do I feel homesick? Yes. And I totally understand both of you when you say the feeling of homesick. Like I miss the smells, I miss the seasons, I miss the seasoning of the food that is always in the air. I miss all that. But here, I found home in the caring for the other people. Like caring for other people is something that Newfoundlanders do really well. And that what made me feel home.
Beautiful. Thank you. Karen, you're on.
Growing up, I used to feel sort of out of place, to be honest. And it wasn't until I moved away to Corner Brook to go to school and then to work that I started to really appreciate Burgeo, and I started spending a lot more time at the beaches and at the park. So when I go home now, I go for a walk at the beach, or I stick close to my mom's house, and that's home for me, just relaxing and exploring in nature. where I live now, the Codroy Valley, the ocean is a bit farther away from me. It's a 15 to go to a beach. It's about a 15-minute drive or 20-minute drive on the highway, and it's not quite the same as just driving through town for a few minutes to get to where I need to be. I like to relax. When I get stressed, I like to go to the beach and take off my socks and shoes and just stand in the ocean. It doesn't matter how cold it is. It could be in October, but it's very grounding. And that, the ocean for me is home. So when I visited Labrador for the first time, my husband's home, it reminded me a lot of Burgeo. And again, I felt this, as soon as I got there, I felt a sense of home, like I had been there before, even though I had never set foot in Labrador before. It just felt so much like Burgeo in a way that made me appreciate my hometown even more.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Marley. I guess Daniel had a question.
I mean, I just had a couple statements. I almost feel like that question that you asked, Marilee, could like fuel so much more conversation. Like, I want to hear from like Charlotte. I want to hear from Anna. Like, I want to know where everyone's from. I want to know where you're from and what do you consider home. So maybe I can like steal your question and like throw it back at everyone else first, and then I'll talk more.
Okay, so the question is up. Marley, you first.
Oh, wow. I feel a piece of what everybody said. And I think, you know, in my family, we all have had a sense of belonging close to the ocean or close to water, whether it's a stream or a river or an ocean. And I grew up in southwestern New Brunswick near the Bay of Fundy, which is a beautiful, beautiful body of water. And coming to Newfoundland, when I was 2, I lived on a little island called Deer Island in the Bay of Fundy. My mother actually ran away with my stepfather, and she worked at the sardine factory, and she would take me to work, and the smell of sardines, and I'd be sitting there. I was only 2 or 3. But anyway, when I came to Newfoundland first with my husband, I was a child again. I was like in that place. That little island in New Brunswick was Newfoundland. I couldn't believe it. And what that brought with me, those, you know, those smells and feeling grounded, like Karen, what you spoke of, it just, you know, that's how I feel when I'm near the ocean. I feel, you know, the beach is, what is that about the border of the sky, the sea, and the land? You know, being in that space must be a really sacred, holy place that speaks to our most essential essence. And that for me, I guess, is home. Thank you.
I'm just gonna pass that to Charlotte in a second. One thing that I would like to say, it's very fascinating hearing that and like how the ocean attracts so much. According to the African Brazilian religion that I follow, which is the Candomblé, the water was the birth. That's where every single human and God was brought to life. So and we have like this huge respect for the water. One of the things that I do, and I do that every year, is like in the second day of the year, I go to the ocean and I pay my respects to the water and say, thank you for the year that passed and thank you for the year that is coming. And it is fascinating because the water, especially the salt water, it grounds you in a way that like we have no way to know why, but it does give you that like sense of belonging when you're next to it. And with that, I throw the ball to Charlotte. So where are you from and why? What is the sense of home to you?
Bruno, it's funny you said that. Right when you said that, I got all fiery inside. Because, you know, I'm just thinking about it now. And, well, okay, sorry, let me start from the beginning. It will make sense in the end. But so I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, or I moved here when I was about 10 years old to Newfoundland. And I really do feel like St. John's. I feel like a sense of home here. I get excited when I find new corners of downtown St. John's I haven't been in. But I don't know, I feel, I kind of feel at home wherever I go in a sense. But also equally, I don't know how to explain this, but I feel like I feel home in my own body, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But I feel most in my own body when I'm floating in the water. And I've always loved the water, even as a kid. I'll tell stories about how they had to keep me on the leash when I was a kid. Anytime I'd see the Red River or any kind of body of water, I would just run directly to it, strip off my clothes, and it was an ongoing occurrence. But and even now, my friends see me running towards the ocean and floating, and they're like, "Are you enjoying that? How are you enjoying this?" But yeah, floating the water is, I always kind of half jokingly say, like, I feel like I've returned to the womb when I'm just floating there in the water. So that when you said that the water is where birth comes from, or where, well, you know, we were all here. I was like, oh geez, that's what I was gonna say. That I feel like I'm in the womb again, just being held and supported and weightless. And there's also a sense of, I don't know, submitting and humility, like anything, you know, like my eyes are closed, I'm just floating, I don't know where I am. So yeah, I don't really have as good of an answer as the rest of you. Everything that everyone said so far was profoundly beautiful. And yeah, I can't connect with a physical place in the same way that I just heard everyone speak about. So that's my answer.
But you just did. Your physical place is in water.
That was beautiful, Charlotte.
Yeah, I don't even know how to follow up with that. So I'm gonna throw the ball to Anna. Like, that was just so fantastic. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I also, as everybody was speaking about water, I relate to that a lot too. Charlotte and Daniel know this, but I guess, I don't think this would have been last year. I think now this falls in the year before or so. I returned December, this past December, so I guess it was last year. I lived in England and Germany over the course of like 2 years. And after I came back from England, I was trying really hard to stay. I couldn't, it was really hard to find employment that fed my future. So I don't have a background in fine arts. I've always been an artist, but my studies have been in international business. And I had to leave to continue, like I said, to feed my future. When I was in England, that's where I did finish my degree. I lived near London, and for anybody who has lived in that area, it doesn't have the ocean near it. And I remember once we did this trip down to Brighton, and we were in a club, and I said to my then partner, I was like, can we just leave, because the ocean is right there and I don't want to be in this club anymore. I just want to go sit by the ocean. And I made him leave and come sit by the ocean with me while everybody else was in partying and drinking. And so, yeah, I missed that terribly. But then when I was in Germany, I experienced homesickness in a completely different way than I did in England. In England, it was different. But I just remember the lifestyle in Germany was really confining to me. The organization that I was working for really kind of owned me. Like the way that it was, like they would always talk to me, and they would be like, oh, you know, like after work, like you have to come like to this like party with us. And then also like you spent so much time like at that organization as well. And this was very much ingrained in the culture. there was a certain word for it that they used in German, and I forget exactly what it was, but it was basically your sense of duty that you pay towards like the organization that you work for. And so like between my commute to work and being there, my life was just consumed, and there was no freedom. I had no autonomy over choice of where I was and when. I was in an inter-country long distance relationship as well, because my boyfriend lived a few cities over. So I was like constantly like confined to like, I have to be at this train at this time. I have to meet this car to drive me at that time. And I realized how much freedom Newfoundland offers, because there is so much in the way of the culture here, and kind of this like relaxation that allows people to like, I don't know, like be themselves and also like live their lives the way that they want to. And I missed it so bad. And that to me is one of the biggest things that makes me feel like home is being somewhere that allows me to be free. And I miss my cats, and I miss my family. And I honestly, I have said this so many times in Germany. I was like, I would give just about anything to say yes, bye, and not have to explain it. Just about anything. So freedom and yes, bye, home.
Thank you, Anna. Daniel, I guess it's your turn to answer the question.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's weird listening to everybody else. It's like, of course we're all drawn to the water. Like, what else would we be drawn to at this point? I feel the same way. And I studied in the UK for a few months. And it was that exact same experience actually in Brighton. And we all kind of saw the ocean and we were like, oh my God, like we were having like an emotional reaction together of like, why are we so happy to see? We were in a bus after driving for like 10 hours and so miserable, but like just seeing the water made us all so happy again. And it reminds me of my mom, who she's retired. She like lives with my older brother back home in St. Anthony, and she keeps being asked like by my younger brother in Ontario, like, oh, come move out to Ottawa, like it'll be so great, there's so much here. And she'd love to, but she said, I don't think I can be away from the water. And it's not about being away from like her family or her friends or her parents in St. John's. It's like, that's the reason she gave. It's like, I can't be away from the ocean. It's just like, it's what I'm used to seeing. So yeah, that's really beautiful to hear that it's across so many different people. And so yeah, I grew up in St. Anthony. And then I moved to Corner Brook for school, and then I moved to St. John's. So it's been like a pretty linear trajectory that I think a lot of people in Newfoundland do. It's like small town, move for school, end up in Corner Brook or St. John's for a bit, and then figure it out from there, which it's been really nice. But even now, I haven't been home since Christmas, and I'm like really, really starting to get the itch to want to go back home. And so I'm thankful in the next couple of weeks I'm going to be there. And just seeing like pictures that my brother is sending me of like the paths behind our house that go to the ocean, or just like my mom and like the view from our back porch where you can see the harbor, and like it's things that I never thought I would miss growing up. And I mean, Karen, you might have even heard me complaining in my first year, for God's sake, about like, I hate St. Anthony, I'm so glad I'm in Corner Brook now. But then after a while, you do suddenly realize like, oh God, no, I really miss where I grew up and like where I had all my friends and where I had all these memories. So I guess looping it back into artwork, I heard a lot of similarities, not only between both of you, but like I saw it in my own work, because it's very fueled by memory and place and displacement, and like trying to find a method of art making that helps you cope with that, I guess, and helps you understand it and process it. And so Karen, when you said take lots of pictures, that's pretty much why I'm going home. I'm like taking a camera, taking hundreds of photos of different places I grew up, like in Ingalee and Ship Cove and smaller communities. And I'm hoping that will fuel my art practice for the next year, but hopefully like fuel my soul for the next little while as well when I come back to work. So that's my answer.
Right. And Daniel, I think when I was working on my last series, the What's Left Behind, that
yeah, the watercolor
grief, I think you were at the same time working on a series of your own dealing with grief, and
Mm.
seeing your work really, it's hard to explain, but knowing that a good friend of mine was also processing these feelings through a project, through artwork, it really, it was good for the heart, because
Yeah.
I knew you were going through much the same things, and the imagery in your work, was just like home for me. So it was, oh my God, I'm gonna cry.
Oh, I'm really glad. And I feel like maybe you had the same idea where it's like, okay, I'm gonna make a body of work and it's about grieving and it's about loss, and then it'll all be over with and everything will be great. And it's unfortunately not how it works. Like, my dad passed away almost like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, and all my work today is still like fueled by that, and it pulls at different like heartstrings, I guess. Um, but I think that's one of the cool things about art, and I think it's what you and Shawn are tapping into as well. It's like that connection with somebody else and hearing about somebody else's practice and like drawing those connections between what you're both making. I don't know. It's really beautiful to hear that that people are like having the same emotional reactions to things.
At our core, I think we all go through a lot of the same things,
Mhm.
in terms of how we react to situations, and our own mortality. Everyone passes on, so when we lose someone we love, we all have to cope in our own way. And you said, you thought at first you were going to get through this project, and then you would have that process, but
Yeah.
it's a long process. I mean, it can come in waves. Grief can come in
Mhm.
waves, and it can, feel okay for a number of years, and then it just all of a sudden one day, just smack in the face, just hits you. My my father passed away 25 years ago, and I'm still making artwork
Yeah.
in that reminds me of him. So I think we all go through that in a way.
Yeah, I think I believe the memory is such a tricky thing. Like, uh, it's my only way to cope with my homesickness. Like, I haven't been home in 11 years, and I was going to go home this year, and the airport shut down a day before my flight. Which, in one way, I'm thankful that I didn't went back to Brazil. But also, like, it has been 11 years anxiety for that moment of going back. And yes, like, sometimes, like, I just dive fully in and express that. And you were talking about grief. Like, my grandfather, which was my father to me, passed away almost 20 years ago now. And at least like once a year, I make a piece for him. Like, it's a piece that no one sees, no one knows about it. It's a tiny little piece that I make, put in a box, and it stays there like that. These pieces for you, and that's it. Dealt with, moved on, try to do other thing. But like, I know the next year will come again at God knows what time, and it's just there. And it is something that, like, I actually see a lot in Daniel's work. Like, I've been following your work since I moved here, and Shawn's work for about 3 or 4 years since I met your work for the first time. I noticed that, and I noticed that in all the conversations we had, Karen, which was like an hour-long conversation a couple days ago, and it is beautiful. Like, art has the healing power that is almost instant. That, like, you make it, you heal, but you're not fully healed. Like, you're healed for that moment in your life that you need to be lighter for yourself. And in a couple of years, yes, you're gonna do it again, and you're gonna go through the same process, and you're gonna feel healed again. Just like Daniel is going back home now to feel his soul, for for the next year. Like I go to the ocean every year on the second day of the year to, you know, to feel myself again. And I know that that's something that like most artists do. Like they use art as a healing power for themselves, just so they can keep making art. And
I find it, I don't understand artists who make the same art all the time, because things happen to you and you react, and then you make art of that experience. And I was thinking about a period in my own life when my very long marriage was coming to an end. I had always painted very colorfully, and when I was going through that, couple of years of, leaving a marriage, my work got very dark, and nobody liked my art anymore. But it was what I had to make. Like I had no question that this is how I was feeling. This is what I was trying to express. And it was all very abstract, but it was not colorful. And this is what I was saying in that video, was that you've got to be open to change. You change your style, you change your materials, you change whatever it is that is calling up how you are feeling and what you need to express. Then you just do it. And it may not be what the galleries want or your followers want, but it's what you have to do in order to keep growing as an artist. You don't
Shawn, speaking of not doing work that the galleries want, when we were talking a couple of days ago, you mentioned that, and during your own artist talk, you mentioned that while you were in school and for a period of your adult life, you were making artwork that was, I'm going to say, according to the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel a sense of freedom when you stopped following the rules of the art community?
Yeah, I think I didn't really know what was happening. Like while I was following the rules, I didn't know that there was anything different. Like I just, I was doing it because this is what I was told to do, and I was learning. And then you just kind of, I think it's again a very slow evolution that you begin to make your own work. And so there wasn't frustration really. I think when I was in art school, it was what just what I expected. It had to be. And then, you get everything you've been taught, and you put it all together, and then you throw away this and you keep this, and then you just develop.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I have one short comment. It's not a question at all, but it's like maybe because I love like semantics and like playing with words and finding connections. But as we were talking about the water earlier, and then we started talking about memory and grief and coping, and I think Karen said how it comes in waves. And I was like, I just can't, like, there's obvious connections here, like that were just dancing around us. And I don't know, I think it's a lot to think about. And I'm really thankful that this conversation happened.
Well, I think I would like to thank Shawn and Karen for this conversation, for bringing up so many heavy and at the same time subtle topics that we are talking here today. Thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for everything that you've been teaching us today. I think like every time that we have a conversation, it is a learning experience, and I am humbled to be learning from both of you today. I also would like to thank Eastern Edge for putting the residency together and promoting this conversation to the community. for everyone that is present here. Thank you so much for your hour and a half of time that you've been spending with us tonight. And thank you, Daniel, for the invitation of mediating this conversation that I think that you guys did a great job without me being here. So thank you again. And I'm sure I want to catch the last letter that you guys are gonna send before the residency is over. Please put an alert, Mr. Nash, put an alert on your website and your everything so that letter can just pop up everywhere. If Karen and Shawn doesn't have anything else to say, I'll return the voice to Daniel.
I just want to thank you, Bruno. I was so happy that you were chosen.
Me too. I've been following you and Shawn on Instagram for a while now, and I'm such big fans of you both. And it's really humbling to be in this conversation with two artists that I'm a big fan of.
Aw.
Well, the feeling is mutual. Daniel, that's with you now.
Yeah, I mean, everything's been said. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much, Bruno. I've been really, really enjoying the programming that's been coming out of the FARR program, and just the way that the artists are leading the conversation and really saying like, hey, we're having ownership of this. This is how we want to do it. And this is what we're going to talk about. And I've been loving every second of it, and I can't wait to continue it. But for now, thank you all so much. I'm going to end this call. So have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.